Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. While everybody across the country wants to talk about Matt Rhule's future at Nebraska, what people are not talking enough about, this Nebraska football team being a sneaky college football playoff contender. Now, let's start with this, and I think a lot of Nebraska fans will probably agree with this evaluation from what we've seen from this team in the first half of 2025. Do we think they're necessarily a college football playoff caliber team? Like, no, probably not. I think there are some things that Nebraska needs to clean up to achieve that kind of level, but you best believe two different things. Number one, they have the schedule to do it. I'm looking at this schedule and say, hey, how many quarterbacks are we taking over Dillon left on their schedule? The answer is probably one, and that's USC. How many offenses are we taking over Dillon in this Nebraska offense? And the answer is probably one, and it's USC. You get that football game at home. Like, that's a USC team that has struggled on the road under Lincoln Riley in the Big Ten. Now, number two, and really just as importantly, you talk about making the playoffs all you want. When you get there, you want to be able to compete. I think that version of Nebraska, I think it's there. One of the biggest takeaways I have about Nebraska in the first half of 2025 is, look, I don't think they've played their best football one time to start 2025. But the thing that I'm starting to realize here, they're figuring out ways to win, and that's something we've never said about Nebraska for the last decade about this program. Winning ugly, you have to do it if you want to be the best team in the sport or one of the best teams in the sport. Now, the other thing is, what does Nebraska need to do to start playing their best football, to become a college football playoff caliber team? That's the conversation I want to get into, because quite frankly, that's the most important conversation to have, because if you don't start playing your best football, I mean, heck, it don't even make the college football. I mean, I guess it does matter if you make the college football playoffs, but look, if you make the college football playoffs, you want to make sure that you can compete in the college football playoffs as well. And I do think that version of Nebraska, I think it exists. And I want to talk about it. Before we do, and as always, the Nebraska fans, hey, let it fly in the comment section. Maybe I'm getting a little bit over my skis here. What I think's happening right now is that the Nebraska fans are focused. I shouldn't say broaden it. There are certain Nebraska fans, at least the voices that I'm seeing on the message boards, the voices that I'm seeing on Twitter, I think are far too focused on the flaws or the deficiencies that we see with Nebraska. And look, they exist, and we're about to talk about them. What I think we need to talk enough or more about is the ways you're seeing this football team get better. And more importantly, there's some really good aspects about the a lot of good aspects that a lot of other teams across the country, especially in the Big Ten, don't necessarily have. That's what I want to get into. And look, let's start with the good. How many quarterbacks in this conference? How many quarterbacks left on the schedule are we taking over Dillon? And look, did Dillon have his best game against Maryland over the weekend? No, probably not. But I'll say this: you're very clearly seeing this kid get better at the sport. Here's the other thing that I will say about this Nebraska offense is that Dillon's clearly gotten better. He's got legitimate difference makers around him. I thought Nebraska took a step last year with guys like Jamal Banks. I thought they were solid. It wasn't as bad as year one, right? It was a hell of a lot better. It still didn't feel like upper echelon in the Big Ten. Now I'm looking at Nebraska. I'm looking at the teams that are left on their schedule and say, not only Dillon at quarterback, what about these pass catchers around Dillon? How many quarterback wide receiver room duos are we taking? Because I'll say this: Ja'Cory Barney and Isaiah Hunter and Dane Key. I mean, it's so multidimensional. And the other thing I love is that you have so many different kind of skill sets, right? Dane Key, contest the catch guy. We saw that kind of peep out a little bit against Maryland. Ja'Cory Barney, there ain't many players in this conference that are more electric with the football in space. And Isaiah Hunter is just solid, man. He does a lot of different things, especially in the intermediate portion of the field, really, really well. They got a tight end in Luke Lindenmeyer. Dog in the run blocking department. Nobody talks enough about that. But a guy that is emerging as a legitimate difference maker, as a pass catcher, too. You have a good quarterback. You have a litany of wide receivers that can do different things and test defenses in different ways. Here's the thing that's coming on though. The run game. Now, you have to show it against better defenses than just Maryland. I think going on the road and running the football against Minnesota, that would be a really big deal here. What's the glaring flaw with this Nebraska offense? What's really holding this offense back from truly being playoff caliber? It's the offensive line, it's specifically the tackles. Because I'll say this: the interior of that offensive line, they kick ass in the run game, they hold up and pass. Right, so really solid interior offensive line. They're trying different combos at the tackle position. I don't know if it's ever going to be great, right? I don't know if you can snap your fingers and say, "Oh, Elijah Pritchett, after 3.5 years of below average football, is Elijah Pritchett already all is Elijah Pritchett all of a sudden going to be a first team All Big Ten tackle?" Like, no, probably not. And you hope he continues to get better in 2025. But here's the thing that failed him against Michigan: Emmett Johnson. If you have the ability to run the football, it takes a lot of pressure off your offensive line and pass protection. Say what you want about this, Nebraska. You are starting to see them move some bodies and get the run game going. And I don't think we talk nearly enough about Emmett Johnson being one of the better backs in this conference. And so I'm looking at it and say, hey, I don't know if the tackles will ever become a unit that we trust at a super high level this year. I think Nebraska just missed on Elijah Pritchett. That is what it is. If you can get this run game going and you can stay out of those obvious passing situations and stay on schedule a little bit more, what's that do? Like, it protects your offensive line and pass protection. And if they can do that, you're looking at an offense that's going to be really difficult to stop. Now, you look at the defensive side of the football and say there's one thing that's really coming on. Again, once again, I think Nebraska missed again with the interior of the defensive line. We said it when they committed, Jalen George and Gabe Moore. I did not see what Matt Rhule saw, and maybe there was just a little bit more optimism about the development of a Riley Van Poppel or an Elijah Judy. The interior of that defensive line, I don't think it's going to be great stopping the run. That's just a fact. And there's different things you can do from a schematic standpoint to deal with that. Heavy boxes, get your safeties involved, which I think Nebraska's doing a good job of. It's so hard to throw on this team because one, the secondary is really good. You look at the numbers and say, hey, 55% completion percentage given up. That's ninth best in the country, 4.6 yards per pass, number one in the country. Really solid secondary, right? Here's what's really exciting me is this Nebraska pass rush that didn't seem great to start the year. But what I'm seeing from Williams Nwaneri, I mean, this kid is blossoming right before our eyes. Like, what happens if he continues to get better as the season goes on? I don't mean this to be hyperbolic. You're looking at one of the more talented and disruptive edge rushers that you see in this conference. There's zero question about it. That's how gifted this kid is. We just weren't sure when we were going to see it. Well, guess what? We're starting to see it a little bit. How about the freshman from Dakota, Cade Petrick? I mean, and I hope I said that name right. We loved him when he committed to Nebraska. He was a guy that got on campus, I believe, in the summer. He's emerging as a guy that can make some negative plays. I like what they're doing with Deshaun McCullough. I was a big fan of that in the offseason. You got two flaws, right? You got a flaw in pass protection, specifically at your tackles, and you probably have a little bit of a flaw stopping the run. If you can work around those two flaws and continue to take steps in other areas, I don't think this team is I think this team can get there when you have that college football playoff conversation. Then the other conversation is, hey, look at this schedule, right? You go on the road and play Minnesota Friday night. They're favored by 8.5 points for a reason. Northwestern at home. USC is the one that we all have circled, right? You get them at home and look at USC and what they've done on the road versus what they've done at home. They're just a completely different football team, right? You go on the road and play UCLA, which is a team that we can't overlook now, especially going to California, bye week before Penn State. But you're going on the road to Penn State that is currently 3-3 on the year. But more importantly than that, doesn't have their head coach, but also lost their quarterback one in Rhule. They're going to be starting a redshirt freshman in Ethan Grunkemeyer. Then you get Iowa at home. Outside of that, how many of these games are we not favoring Nebraska in? Maybe on the road at Penn State, but they'll be slight dogs. If they can figure out how to stop the run by then, I love Nebraska's chances going on the road and beating Penn State. And again, so I guess kind of circling back to the conversation that I wanted to do with this episode is I don't think Nebraska currently looks like a college football playoff team. Like we saw last year with Ohio State, if you do enough in the early parts of the season, it doesn't matter what you look like in September. It matters what you look like in November. Can this Nebraska team hit their stride at the right time when they host USC, when they go on the road and play UCLA, when they go on the road and play Penn State? Because if you can do that, this team has a legitimate chance at being 11-1, maybe 10-2. And if you're in that situation, you're in that conversation making the college football playoffs. So while everybody's talking about Matt Rhule and his future at Nebraska, we got to start looking at this team as a playoff team, or at least a team that is a threat to find their way into the college football playoffs. And I'll say this about the Matt Rhule situation, just my 2 cents. It sounds like Penn State is very much eyeing Matt Rhule, and that's not, I ain't no insider. That's just the reports that we're getting. It could be a blessing in disguise for Nebraska. And I want to choose my words carefully. What I mean by that is I would be surprised if Penn State might offer him a little bit more money to come to Penn State. That is what it is. And I'm not saying Matt Rhule doesn't care about money, right? Everybody does. That matters in everybody's job, everybody's life. I think Matt Rhule cares a little bit more about, hey, what program is going to give me the chance to win at the highest level? And this might force Nebraska to really push their chips in. And maybe I'm being a little bit ignorant in this era of the sport with how much energy can get behind this Nebraska program, especially if you do what we just said we think they can do over the last 10 minutes. I wouldn't be surprised if Matt Rhule just looks at Nebraska and says, hey, I like what I'm building here. And Nebraska's giving me the resources to win at the highest level. I don't think Matt Rhule leaves Nebraska to go to Penn State. And I know he's a Penn State alum. I know Penn State means a lot to him. I don't think he leaves Nebraska to go to Penn State for a pay raise. I think he would leave for Penn State because he thinks it gives him a better opportunity to win a national championship. What if Nebraska shows him and makes him promises that you can do it right in Lincoln? It might even be a blessing in disguise. You might get a little bit more support behind this football program than we previously had. We'll see. All right. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. Hey, am I getting a little over my skis? I might be. Let it fly in the comment section. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.